Today's episode is a powerful one because it meets men right at the crossroads of a few really important topics. We're talking to Dr. Greg Schwartz, a man who's lived many lives: athlete, academic, environmentalist, husband, and father. His journey invites us to reflect on what it really means to live with purpose and how we as men can reconnect with something deeper than the daily grind. We get into some big, honest questions. How do discipline and masculinity show up in a man's life beyond sport or career? Why should sustainability matter to men who might not see themselves as environmentalists? And what's the connection between our personal health, our mental well-being, and the health of our planet? This isn't about guilt or finger pointing. It's about clarity, about real leadership, about showing up for our families, for our bodies, and for the world we're leaving behind. If you've ever felt caught between old school masculinity and new expectations of what it is to be a man, or unsure just how to make your life really count, Greg's story might just spark something in you. So whether you're skeptical, curious, or already on your own path to change, stick around. This one might just be for you. Hey everyone, and welcome to Feel Good for Men Who Want Change with me, Tim Barber. This is a space to explore healthy masculinity through open and honest conversations that don't preach or shame, but invite reflection and action. If you've ever felt left out or left behind, you're not alone. This is a show for men who want to grow and do good. In this episode, we're diving into the powerful connection between masculinity, personal well-being, and environmental responsibility. Greg Schwartz, aka the Planet Doctor, is a professor of environmental geography, a sustainability expert, a former pro quarterback, and a top 5 ranked masters sprinter. He's also a husband, father of 2, and someone who embodies a healthy, holistic vision of what it means to be a man today. Greg, welcome to Feel Good.
Thanks, man. Good to see you, Tim.
So look, Greg, you've got this, quite the Instagram following. But for those who haven't seen it or aren't familiar with your work, can you tell us a bit about your upbringing and what shaped your values and how you see the world?
Yeah, of course. I was raised in LA, suburban LA, and kind of exurban LA, so it was a bit bucolic. I was practically feral. My parents just let me wander. So I was raised by 2 Nebraska farmers.
Okay.
Former Nebraska farmers turned academics. And so there was a lot of structure, a lot of productivity, great work ethic, but it was never difficult. It was fun, you know?
Yeah.
But I mean, it was early to bed, early to rise. We had a big corner lot in this suburban neighborhood, so my dad always found just a ton for us to do, and I loved it. We traveled a lot, took a lot of road trips, and you know, it was great fun. It was a golden childhood. I gotta admit. But a lot of those road trips gave me the inkling to travel, and also all that freedom. I mean, I was just out, 5 years old, just wandering. You know, it helped me to learn to self-regulate, which was good.
Yeah. How do you compare that to because you live pretty central London these days? How do you compare that to the way your boys are growing up?
We think about that all the time. My wife and I. She's from New Orleans, and I'm from LA, and but both suburbs. And our kids, you know, with each generation, things change so much. I mean, but no, I think about that all the time, and I never let my kids alone. And it's also just kind of the zeitgeist today. You don't leave your kids alone, you know. But it's bizarre to me. I mean, I remember walking to the corner store when I was 3. I'm buying candy alone.
Wow.
And my parents are like, "Oh, what you got there?" I mean, and my kids are 10, and I'm just starting to think, can you walk to the library? So it's different. Both areas are safe and quality living, and, you know, that's good. But, you know, you do have to give kids more structure, more guidance, more safety than you used to.
Yeah.
But I'm very happy for where they're growing up.
Yeah.
Very, very happy. And I'm probably even biased, but I do think Central London's a great place to raise kids. I really do. Some people might disagree.
Well, look, our kids were playing together on Hampstead Heath on Saturday, and they all seem to be having a good time and be well adjusted for what it's worth. So, I think we can pat ourselves on the back, doing okay. And look, parents, farmers turned academics. Like, do you know what it was that made them make that change?
That's interesting. My dad's dad, who was born in 1887, talk about generation gaps, on his deathbed, made my dad promise to finish college.
Wow.
And he ended up going all the way through and getting his PhD and becoming college dean. So it really mattered to him. He was 22 when his dad told him that. My mom was always very intellectually curious. So it was just in them. It was just in them. And also it was a way, because, they were, again, raised on farms in Nebraska. I think academics as a way to expand your world.
Yeah.
It's a really high quality life in central Nebraska, but it's also can be a bit provincial. And so I think it expanded them greatly, and they like that.
Yeah.
And I'm really grateful. My sister and I both turned into professors because of them. And it's a good life.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
great. And look, you have had, as you said, your own academic journey. And before that, you've had this wild mix of athlete and academic. Like, tell us a bit about that, and how did sports also shape your sense of discipline, resilience, and manhood?
Yeah, good question. I mean, it's fundamental to understanding your body and your wildness and your manhood. My dad was a big college football star.
Okay.
He held the record at the school he played at as a running back for 50 years.
Wow.
My mom was a synchronized swimmer. Isn't that interesting? Like old Ethel Merman style. And then, we had a very academic home and a very athletic home. And so just constantly tossing the ball around. I played 3 sports in high school, 3 sports in college, just really, really into it. I'm much skinnier now. Both of us were bigger before.
Yeah.
I lost about 20, 25 kilos.
Yeah,
and it was very important to me. And my dad was never heavy-handed about it, but it's great. So you learn a lot of self-discipline from the work. I loved the work. I loved the pushing my body to the maximum. That's what I love about track and field athletics, which I do now.
Okay.
It's just there's no excuses. There's no escape. I mean, it's just this beautiful, hormesis, this pain. Also, my dad was in the Marines. I don't know if I told you that.
No, I didn't know that.
Yeah, and so he was a military guy briefly, 2 or 3 years. And he was never rigid about all of that, but it gave him a lot of self-discipline, obviously, and he was an athlete. And so I got a lot of that filtered to me. But God bless him, because he never made it seem difficult or hard. He just made it seem fun, like a game. And he even said that. And so I'm a very regimented, self-disciplined person. And before I was married and had kids, people said I lived like a monk, and I really did. I think it's some kind of past life thing. That's for another podcast. But I mean, just very Spartan and self-disciplined. And that, I like living that way. So anyway, that did help me. And I do love the pushing your body to the limit idea of that. It's cathartic and distilling.
Yeah. How much of that do you think is nature versus nurture? You think about your father as a role model, the fact that, you grew up around sports and seemed to align well with that lifestyle, versus how you would have been able to do that had you not had your father as a role model or something along those lines.
So fascinating. I mean, usually when people ask that question, it's both. I mean, it's nurture and nature, of course, because you see, one of my high school coaches said, Gary Poe, he said, your body will tell you what sport you're going to play.
Okay.
And so it's kind of whoever your parents were, whoever, whatever, if you're adopted or whatever, Colin Kaepernick, a famous quarterback for the 49ers, was adopted. And so his parents, he didn't, but you just start to see, whoa, I can jump higher than everybody, and I can do this and that. And it becomes a part of your identity. It becomes a part of your confidence. It becomes part of, and so you do what feels good and where you can excel. So it's both.
Yeah.
But I mean, like they say, Mozart, he was obviously a genius, but his dad toured him around Europe endlessly, like showing off his little star.
Yeah.
So that was hugely nurture, but he had the nature.
Yeah.
And when they come together, just like Venus and Serena Williams and Tiger Woods, I mean, they had the nature, but boy, they had a big dose of nurture.
Yeah.
Heavy-handed nurture. So it's both. Again, my dad was, it was more by example than by any kind of a push. He was so gentle about it. I'm amazed.
Yeah. So it sounds like you loved sport, liked the lifestyle that it gave you. Like, what prompted the transition into academia and ultimately environmental work?
Yeah, I mean, I went sort of as far as it could have gone. I could have pushed it a bit more, but I made the same decision that my dad did, actually. At a certain point, we just decided, gosh, my body's kind of beat up and I'm going to focus on my brain,
Okay.
you know?
Yeah.
But also, I had backpacked around to about 40 countries when I was young, and I saw a lot of unbelievable beauty, but a lot of environmental degradation.
Mm.
And it made me say, and I knew I was going to be an academic sort of eventually. And I decided I'm going to devote my research and writing and teaching to solving these problems,
Yeah.
because it was pretty jarring. And, 99% of the world is not inhabited. We live on 1% of the land. And I went to a lot of that. I mean, I took buses all over South America, East Africa, Southeast Asia, and you just see a lot of the in-between. And what I saw was a lot of rainforest being cut down and burned. I mean, that smell is so coated in the inside of my nose, I'll never forget it, and it really disturbed me.
Yeah.
And so anyway, yeah, it made me think, okay, well, what's the best way that I could do this? Should I just go run in front of the chainsaws right now? Well, no, maybe I'll develop my ideas and try to change it from the source.
Yeah. When you think back to that early period, is there something in you that made you take those bus trips? Because I think for a lot of people, if I think I did some traveling, but I certainly didn't seek out that kind of experience or come across that kind of experience. It was a bit of a party for, 6 to 12 months. So I'm wondering what it was that drew you to those experiences, those learnings, and ultimately shaping your career.
I had an insatiable wanderlust. I don't know why.
Yeah.
It was insatiable. It was like a burning desire that I cannot describe. Like, I got to get out of here. And I was raised in a wonderful area. I mean, it looked like Tuscany, for goodness sakes. It's a little sloping hill outside of LA. It was beautiful. On one level, it was that where I was raised was so perfect. I actually wanted to see the imperfections in the world. Okay. I remember feeling that.
Wow.
But also, I just wanted to leave. I think it was some of the wanderlust that my parents had being raised in, like I said, in the center of the continent, and they hadn't traveled much in their lives until they could, which is in their 20s. And so, yeah, it was just an insatiable desire. I mean, I just had to know what was out there, and then when I saw what was out there, I was like, this is gorgeous, and there's a lot of destruction, and I've got to help.
Yeah. Okay. That makes sense. Because when I was doing my own research, I came across these incredible stories, on your TED Talk where you've got this burning plane going down, swimming with sharks in another story. I mean, you clearly someone who likes a bit of adventure.
Yeah. Oh, my gosh. I mean, I look back, and you mentioned we should talk about these stories, and I it's crazy because at that time, and that's just the tip of the iceberg. Yeah. I mean, I was defending my safari group from this troop of baboons. It was crazy. Talk about masculinity. They sensed this like alpha desire in me to conquer them. And anyway, election riots in Kenya and luging down glaciers. It was crazy. Yeah, I was a bit, here's my point. It was fun and exciting, but I was a bit cavalier with my safety and health.
Okay.
And I didn't realize at that point how much investment your parents and even just God and your ancestors or whatever put into you, because now I think about my kids doing those things and I have to set them free and let them be wild, because especially my young one is wild,
okay,
which we may have talked about. And, they have to do that. They have to learn and skin their knee and whatever. I just want to keep them away from the things. So I wasn't cavalier in ways like I didn't take drugs.
Yeah.
I didn't do things like that. But I crashed a lot of cars and did just all kinds of crazy stuff. And so that was fun and that was exciting. And you have to do a bit of that. And boys probably do that more than girls, probably. But it was amazing and it was thrilling. And I would not be who I am without that. But I mean, I was very close to death many times.
Yeah.
And maybe that's what makes me a bit more safe and conservative now. I mean, I'm like, vegan and just go to bed at 8:30. I mean, it's just ridiculous.
It's a different life, but it's a valued one.
Yeah.
That's interesting. And look, I can see the genesis of where this sort of, care for the planet came from. But as a man, like, if we think about masculinity, like what role does caring for the planet play in how you see yourself? And what do you say to men who perhaps even resist the idea of sustainability for whatever reason?
What I say is, I trigger one of the most primal masculine instincts that we have, maybe the most. Obviously, it's debatable. I say, protect your land, protect your home. And that fires men up, you know?
Yeah.
If somebody's invading your village or they're storming the castle, there's nothing that gets a man going. I mean, I just feel, you know, I know you do too. It's like, whoa.
Yeah.
And so because what happens is we've turned climate change into something intellectual and not emotional. It's very, of course, data driven. It's about far off, slow moving phenomenon, but we are evolutionarily designed to respond to immediate change that can affect our tribe, our family, our land. Oh, the hailstorm is going to ruin your crops. This wild animal is going to threaten my family. If you told people 10,000 years ago, oh, there was a flood 15,000 miles away, they say, well, who cares? I don't care.
Yeah.
Or the sea level's rising.
Yeah.
In 2 centuries, the sea level's going to rise. I don't care. I got to eat. And so that's emotional. So we have to bring it back to home, back to emotion, and back to right now, which is protect your land. And obviously that doesn't mean it in the same way as it used to, but it might mean, hey, go, take legal action against the coal-fired plant that wants to be put in your neighborhood so your kids are going to breathe that. Or, get an electric car or solar power because that'll clean up your air for your family today, or protect that local lake or river from the effluence of a dairy farm.
Yeah.
Again, we just got to bring it back home. And it's an evolution, but it's still protect your land.
Yeah.
So that gets been. Here's an interesting statistic. In a few studies, the one statistic that turns climate change skeptics into believers is the coastal real estate, the decline in coastal real estate value because of sea level rise.
Okay.
Especially if it's your own home, of course.
Yeah.
Talk about emotion. But when it hits your pocketbook or your emotions, those stats, these specific studies were from Florida, which is going to be covered by water fully. That is going to happen. I don't know exactly when, but that's going to happen. Just a few meters is going to cover the whole thing. Yeah. So anyway, that's interesting. And so you can find it there. You tell them, protect your home, and you can also tell them, hey, real estate value.
Yeah. Hit them in the heart, then hit them in the pocket. Yeah. Right. It's interesting because there is that sort of provider protector archetype. It doesn't seem to be deployed to this challenge as it has been in others, and it almost feels like a PR mistake, right? Because if it were in the way you framed it, it's so powerful. Yeah,
it is a PR mistake, and that's kind of my thing, to be honest. Is I realized, okay, I want to help the planet. Should I stand in front of the chainsaws? Should I design better solar panels? Should I be an engineer? Should I make the new battery? And I realized, well, I want to guide the narrative because we largely have the technology that we need to save the planet, but we largely don't have we've updated our technology, I always say, but we haven't updated our beliefs. Yeah. So I thought, well, I can read and write and I can speak. Let me try to guide the narrative.
Yeah, that's really powerful. Yeah. It made me think also when you were speaking how Arnold Schwarzenegger, I remember listening to a podcast with him on talking about how he was trying to convince other politicians who were skeptical about climate change. He would talk about pollution and dirty air for the children instead of, climate data or something like that. And that would be the thing that got people mobilized.
Yeah. He's a great example because he's a Republican. I'm generally lean left, but as we were talking the other day, there's a lot of ways where I'm more right, more in the middle. But Arnold Schwarzenegger was kind of in the middle. He's a very practical guy. Yeah. I liked him. I like a lot about him. But yeah, pollution is a great way to get people because, for instance, whether climate change is happening or not, which it is, it's one of the most scientifically proven natural phenomena in the history of the world. Even if it's not happening, shouldn't we not pollute the planet?
Yeah.
And again, it comes down to protect your land.
Yeah, absolutely. One of the themes that is clear and consistent, in the talks that you give and then the writing that you do is this sort of connection between our personal health and our bodies and the health of the planet. You talk to me a bit about that and paint me a picture for how you see that.
Absolutely. I mean, if you think about it, our body is a living system. The earth is a living system. The resources, carbon, hydrogen, oxygen, nitrogen, and minerals that flow through our body flow through the planet, and they get exchanged back and forth. So we toxify the planet, we toxify our bodies. We toxify our bodies, we toxify the planet. And nature recycles everything, but humans don't. We created the idea of garbage. Nothing is not recycled. There is no garbage in nature, but we create these toxins that then we don't want to cycle through things, and we put them away, and we even throw away a lot of valuable stuff. Anyway, one good example of that I had this ping moment during my TEDx talk, and I talk about this, is the good bacteria in our gut and the good bacteria in the soil is actually incredibly similar, the same 4 categories of bacteria. And protecting those is incredibly important. And one of the things that kills the bacteria in both cases is pesticides. And so we have to cut down on pesticides. It's a very, very simple step to save our soil, because soil, a lot of people don't know this, soil already holds more carbon than all the trees on Earth and the atmosphere combined.
Wow.
We think about trees, but the soil holds more. And it's actually in a state of carbon depletion, so it can hold so much more. When the good bacteria are alive in it and healthy, they trigger the plant and say, hey, feed us. We want some sugar. So the plant says, oh, I got to suck down more carbon, turn it into sugar, and feed you guys. So it's a very simple mechanism. And so keeping healthy soil is so important. And even when we garden, we touch the soil, and those bacteria get into our skin and release feel-good hormones and serotonin. It's amazing. Talk about symbiotic.
Yeah. Have you noticed a connection in when you are paying more or less attention to your own physical health and how you think about what's going on around you, sort of climate-wise, planet-wise?
Well, I like the point that you're making. What I realize is there is a strong connection there. When people take care of their own health, they have a mental framework that makes them much more likely to take care of the planet's health. And they do start to see this overlap, because you think, oh, well, if I buy organic and unprocessed food, it's better for my body. And then you look at like, well, that's, or farm to table or whatever. So the connection is natural. And then there are philosophical and spiritual dimensions as well, which are huge, if that's your ilk, but which that is a huge deal to me. And that goes into another realm. But again, the Earth is a living system on the physical plane, and it's also an energetic system, and it's has a spiritual identity. And so, depending on how much that matters to you, that can really spur you as well.
Yeah. It's a really interesting connection, I think, because, and I thought this listening to your talks, I think it's easy for men in particular, if they're trying to get in shape, maybe they put a bit of weight on when they've had kids or they're working in a desk job. It's an easier leap to think about agency over your own health than it is to make a leap of agency over the outcome of the planet. And it is a topic that is overwhelming, and a lot of people retract from it as a result. And I think it's really potentially a very powerful link to help people combine the agency they feel for their own health and the agency they can feel for the planet.
Yeah, well, you put it well. It's a sort of a gateway relationship with your body, then you can make that leap. And then, but you got to keep it. And I mean, the universe has a way of triggering us to care about certain things. I mean, if you don't care about your health and then you get sick or you get a heart attack or then all of a sudden you care about your health, and it's very interactive. And that's what's happening with the planet. It's, big changes are hitting us, and it makes us say, maybe we should pay attention. But yes, caring for your body first. And then, like I say, trying to do that same thing on planetary scale, which is, how can I protect this local area for my tribe, for my family, and for my own health? One of the simplest ways to do that is grow food at home.
Yeah, okay.
Because you realize the magic that happens when you just plant something, and then you so many benefits to that. It's crazy, but that's usually a step that I talk about.
Yeah.
It's tough. I mean, I live very central London. I don't have a speck of dirt near me where I can grow anything. But if you're not in that dense of an environment, you can. Or I guess you do it in pots. There's ways you could do it.
Yeah. No, I've got a book called The Self-Sufficient Gardener that my mum gifted to me. It's 50 years old. A guy called John Seymour wrote it, and in this sort of chapter, he talks about what you can do with the amount of space you have. And he says some of the richest tomatoes he's ever seen grown have been on the window box of cityscape apartments. Because if they're
Wow.
cared for and you think about the soil and that kind of thing, you can still do a lot with a little. You're not going to feed your family for a year, but you can
Yeah.
get a connection.
You get a connection. Yeah, in my last book, I wrote about urban gardens and the rise of urban and community gardens. And, where maybe we don't have the space around our home, but you can go a couple blocks away and there's a community garden. And those are
Yeah.
becoming huge. It provides food sovereignty and all
Yeah.
kinds of things. For instance, in areas that have had urban blight, like Detroit, cities where there's retraction and there's, maybe manufacturing has left or whatever, and you have these plots of land that are just left there.
Yeah.
Detroit has giant urban organic farms now. It's amazing.
Wow.
Yeah, so it's a great opportunity.
Yeah. So given that and thinking about how our modern lifestyles, do you think they have disconnected men from purpose and nature and themselves, whether they're in cities or not, whether they're earning a living one way or another? How do you think about that connection?
I think disconnection is the biggest root problem of everything we have going on the earth today that's wrong. Disconnected from our higher selves, disconnected from nature, disconnected from each other.
Yeah.
And of course, technology separates us from each other. So we're separated from nature because, yes, for thousands of years we lived in wilderness, and then all of a sudden, a lot of us moved 200 years ago to cities. So that's obvious. But the larger point is that this points to, and it's such an important question, is masculinity has evolved, and that's really essential, and I assume you would agree. That's kind of what this is about, right? And so cavemen, men needed to be strong. They needed to have brute force. They needed to have some spatial awareness. Where are the dangerous wild animals? Where can we get food? Those skills were very necessary. That's what a man was. If you weren't those things, I guess you weren't a very good, effective man at that time. And then we needed conquerors, people to conquer nature. We needed people to conquer men and women, but men to conquer, other societies, conquer other men. And then the Age of Enlightenment comes along, and we realize, we have to, what's the men that were moving the world forward were intellectual. They were inventors. They were philosophers. And a caveman would look at those men and say, they're not real men.
Yeah.
They're not bashing people over the head. But they were real men, and they were moving the world forward. And that's sort of the example that I like to use, because today, especially for the men who are sort of intransigent and super, super traditional, and we need those traditional values, but we need them to expand. I always say, modern men, we don't want them to be less masculine. We want them to be more fully human, And so you're adding on this emotional awareness, deep self-awareness, and then it becomes more attractive, Be more. Don't be less masculine, be more human. But anyway, so the men that are moving the world forward now we don't need them to conquer other men. We need them to conquer themselves. We need them to be masters of themselves. We don't need them to conquer nature anymore. We need them to harmonize with nature. Those are the men that are moving the world forward. And if we're just the old version of men and you haven't added on that new, then you could actually be slowing the world down. And you are providing a very masculine, that's great. It's just not moving us forward anymore to be just that.
Yeah, I really like that reframe of doing more, not less, because I think sometimes that's what puts people off the topic, whether it's climate, whether it's DEI, whether it's pick any progressive topic. You're telling me I shouldn't be doing this. You're telling me I shouldn't be strong or I shouldn't be capable. It's like, no, like you can be those things. We just need to, point it over here and add these things to it.
Exactly. And that's a challenge.
Yeah.
And men like, so do women, but men like challenges. Be more, do more, expand, stretch, go into these parts of you that may be a little scary. That's the funny thing is, going into emotion, it's not that it's not manly. It's scary. Guys, a lot of people don't want to go there. And so it to me, it's extremely masculine to go into those spaces and explore that. But what do men need to be now? Men need to be different things at different times in history. And now we need men that conquer themselves and that harmonize with nature.
Yeah. No, fully agree. And In your the Oxford talk, you mentioned some research where you said women's decision making when they have disposable income leads to better environmental outcomes than when men do. Tell me a bit more about that, and why do you think that is?
Absolutely. So, yeah, I was researching in the Costa Rican rainforest, and then a lot of the land near there was something called payment for ecosystem services. And I found that women landowners made more environmentally favorable decisions overall than male landowners. And I found that that was because, and these are extended interviews, so this is very qualitative and quantitative. And I found that it was because women tended to see the land that they owned as their home and as their long-term home. And men tended, not always, to see it more as a source of income. And so obviously that affects the way you treat that land.
Yeah.
So here's what's interesting. I don't think we fully realize how, I don't know what the word is, suppressed, or how women are basically the largest underclass on earth. Women own 1% of the land on earth. Women control 10% of wealth. That, I mean, right there, that's pretty shocking.
Yeah.
And I always say that even if you're not philosophically aligned with feminism, everyone should be a statistical feminist. Was I giving you this concept the other day when we were talking?
No, this is new.
A statistical feminist, because when women have more power and have access and can vote and have access to education and access to credit and those kinds of things and access to powerful positions, all kinds of statistics in that society get better.
Yeah.
In ways that are statistically more significant than if men get those things. So, crime rates come down, literacy rates go up. Obviously, infant mortality goes down, and economic productivity goes up. Like, just all these incredible things. And so, if you want your society to be better, we need to give women those rights. And you look at the societies where women have those kinds of rights, and they're generally faring much better. So yes, I mean, I am both a statistical feminist and a philosophical feminist. And again, that doesn't mean give up your masculinity, capitulate to women, and let them dominate us. That's just a foolish, old, traditional way to look at it.
Yeah.
It's in the most utilitarian way, as Gandhi said, women, really the minds and emotions of women, because we've taxed their bodies, they're the biggest untapped resource on earth. And so, if we want to get things better, let's tap that resource.
Yeah. Why do you think some men don't immediately buy into that or resist it?
Gosh, I mean, isn't that the question? It's just old school masculinity, machismo. Every culture has their version of it.
Yeah.
And these things also have an ebb and a flow, though. And so, I mean, at certain points in certain societies, much more matrilineal than others. But I mean, if we could solve that, we'd get Nobel Peace Prize.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, that might be for another episode.
Right.
So do you think then, I suppose in that vein, that the Western men are becoming less masculine, or do you think the definition, or one of the definitions of a modern man, is urging them to be less masculine?
Yeah, it's a great question. And this is what I think scares men. They don't want to be less masculine. But of course, we do see that biologically we are becoming less masculine in some ways just because of endocrine disruptors. I mean, naturally our testosterone declines about 1% a year, but then you also see that because of endocrine disruptors and other factors, testosterone is declining in excess of that, about another 1% a year at an aggregate level, which is pretty shockingly fast.
Yeah.
So we have to discuss these philosophies and update those. And we also just have to look at how the modern world has changed. And again, these toxins that cycle through the earth and through our body and how they're affecting us. And obviously they affect women as well. But endocrine disruptors, PFAS, forever chemicals, just so many that are in our food and in any scented candle and in just, oh my gosh, in our, spandex, and it's just crazy. But all of these things have hit us so quickly on an evolutionary scale, within 50, 80 years. Pesticides are big ones, that our bodies are reeling and trying to adapt, and so that certainly affects our masculinity. But, and it is a new territory to navigate with, women are taking on more power, and that really scares traditional men, I think, brings out their rage. I love this quote. You and I both have married powerful women.
100%.
And to me, that shows a lot of strength. The quote is, real women scare boys, but they excite men.
Okay. That's a good one.
And, of course, it aggrandizes us because so of course, let's go with that. But yeah, we both married powerful women, and I would have it no other way.
Yeah.
I want a powerful partnership, I want to be a power couple. And you two are, and I believe we are, and some men want a more traditional relationship, and there's nothing wrong with that at all. And some women want that too. That's great. I guess we neither should judge each other, but we should also recognize that the world is evolving. So, I mean, goodness gracious, those definitions are tough, but there are advantages. I'll put it this way. I do think it's incorrect to think that we should all be exactly the same. I don't think, women and men should be exactly the same. I think that is an error to think that, because women will probably always be more emotionally aware, probably, on the aggregate again, to use that word. And men will probably always be physically stronger, maybe better at building bridges and this and that. I mean, there are gender differences, and that's really important. And, actually and I know that, of course, but I did a Tony Robbins seminar live, and he kind of reminded me of that. He hit that pretty hard, and I really love him.
Yeah.
And he really kind of reinforced that to me. And that's important, because if you don't say that, you do lose the traditional men.
Yeah.
You can't bring them along and say, like, no, we should all be exactly the same, and men, we should split everything down the middle, and you have the same roles. And I don't think that. Equality is different than, we should have equal opportunity.
Yeah.
But no, there's definitely, male and female roles still.
Yeah. I think that's where some men have been lost, right? Is when you ask them to believe something that they know objectively to be not true, or you ask them to buy into something that they find really hard to wrap their head around, even if they might agree with fairness, equality of opportunity, those kinds of things. But this whole progressive movement feels like it's just failed from a change management perspective to recognize the audience in front of them and take them along with them.
Yeah. Well, heard someone say that, and I was saying this to you the other day, the Democrats in the U.S. and maybe labor here as well, they got a lot of things right, and then they took it too far.
Yeah.
And then you lose people.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. Well, work to be done. And I suppose with work to be done, we need good leaders. Like in your experience, whether that's in sports, in academia, or the work you've done in the corporate world too, like what does real leadership look like today, like especially for men?
Such a good question. And I really think it comes down to, because I think about this a lot, the difference between power and force. And there's a great book called Power versus Force by David Hawkins, which is one of the formative books that I read, and I really recommend that. Force is, it's easy to be, intransigent, bold, and aggressive, and unchanging. That's easy. And a lot of people see that as, that's a strong man, that's a leader, and that's a dictator. And sometimes you need a dictator in rare cases. I mean, that word comes from the ancient Romans, and they would put someone in a position. It was a 6-month position when they needed to get shit done. Excuse me for the, that's powerful. That's wonderful. But, true power is different. True power is the ability to hold, in my opinion, I mean, there's many definitions, but as far as a leader, it's not being one thing. It's not being, just one simple, powerful thing or forceful thing. It's holding two opposites within you, like tradition and the future. Those are opposites. What your mind tells you, what your heart tells you, what one group wants and what another group wants, what nature needs and what business needs. You have to hold those within you. And that tension, and we've all done this, and just be comfortable holding those in you. And that tension distills, in my mind, a better answer, a higher vibrational wisdom that comes out of that, because you can hold those within you. And that's what a real leader does. They don't just make sweeping judgments and deal with, extremes and polarized opposites. Everything's not black and white. And so a really good example is with kids. If you give them really harsh punishment, okay, that's one way to go. It's unthinking. Or if you're completely permissive and let them do whatever they want, that's another thing. That's very easy. But if you say they need discipline, but they need love, they need structure, but they need guidance, and you hold on to that, and every good parent does this, and then you say, hey, why are you doing this? Let's talk about it. What's going on within you? Because I'm not going to let that happen anymore. You're still firm, but you're loving. And so you see this higher vibrational reality, this wisdom pops out. And to me, that's what good leadership is. It's true power.
Yeah.
And it's being big enough to hold those opposites within you and letting something better emerge.
Yeah. It sounds dangerously close to asking for nuance, which is something we might be lacking these days. No, it really made me think of there's a guy, I quote him all the time, Jocko Willink. I don't know if you come across his work. He's a former Navy SEAL.
Yeah.
And he's written a book called The Dichotomy of Leadership, which is basically like, yes and, right? Both and. Like sometimes,
that's cool.
Sometimes you're strong and silent. Other times you need to share and you need to be vocal. And the same is true for all these different principles of leadership. And it sounds a lot like what you're talking about there, which is like being able to find what's needed in the moment, hold to opposing thoughts and take what you need.
100%. I'll have to read that. That sounds good.
Yeah, it's good. You mentioned kids there. Like, how do you talk about this stuff to your boys?
Yeah, I mean, my boys are 10 and 7, so they're not ready for the real powerful subtleties there. But it is incredibly important to me to raise men that are aware, that are respectful of women.
Yeah.
I pass that on as much as I can. We have conversations constantly. But really what I realize is that this is sort of a slightly different point, is that they're very different boys.
Yeah.
Our oldest is actually adopted. Did I tell you?
I did not know that. Oh, no, sorry, I did see that. I saw that on your bio, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, our oldest is adopted, and he's my wife's brother's son. My wife's brother died, so we adopted him.
Wow,
and he's a wonderful boy, and he's just a bright light. And he is so different from our second son, our 7-year-old. They're wildly different, as a lot of kids are.
Yeah.
And so they need very different things. And so I give them I meditate on it a lot, to be honest, and I give them what I think they need. But yeah, it's incredibly important to me to raise strong men who are respectful men.
Yeah.
And when, just for one specific topic, when the idea of dating girls comes up, all I want to impart onto them is, hey, you can go have your fun and have all the sex in the world. It's not going to be as good unless you really get to know that wonderful girl.
Yeah.
That's the best. That's the brass ring. That's what you want.
Yeah.
You want to get to know this wonderful whole human and just enjoy everything about her.
Yeah.
Just going and having some physical fun, that's okay.
Yeah.
It's not as good as this, though. And so that's the best way to, because if you say, don't have sex, they're going to go, I want to have sex.
Yeah.
But I say, have as much as you want. Just have it with a good quality girl who you can love and respect.
Yeah.
She'll love and respect you.
Yeah.
And so that's kind of where I'm steering to that. And I want to talk to them about those things. My parents didn't really talk to us about those things.
Yeah.
And that's okay. They raised me incredibly well. But I want to talk to them about that so they feel safe coming to me, because you know what? If they don't get it from us, and I know you agree, they're going to get it somewhere.
100%. Yeah.
Going to get it online.
Yeah.
God forbid.
Yeah, it's an interesting time for all of that at the moment. We've just had this Netflix adolescence series. There's a huge amount of talk off the back of that. And there was already about negative online influences, particularly men, to name, we could name some, but we don't really need to give them more time. Do you think about that environment in which your boys are growing up in and the influence you can play as a positive role model for them?
Gosh, of course. My wife and I talk about this all the time. I mean, one of the main things is no phones
Yeah.
and very little screen time, or not internet screen time. Because, excuse me, if it's, for instance, Netflix, it's a little safer because they can't just Google anything,
Yeah.
because a couple times because they'll just say, Alexa, show me whatever
Yeah.
on YouTube. And a couple times something crazy showed up and we were like, whoa.
Yeah.
But they're not old enough to be interested in that yet, but they're on the cusp. Anyway, it's really keeping them away from technology, and it's preemptively putting in their brains and into their character what we want, so that is their foundation, and then whatever comes into them and tries to taint them, that will already have a base.
Yeah.
Simple as that, because it's going to come.
Yeah.
And they're going to see PORN. They're going to see, that's how me and my wife say it when we're around them. We're like, like, don't let them see that.
Yeah.
So, I mean, golly, it's difficult. And I guess, again, it's kind of like what my parents did. You just pack their day full of good stuff.
Yeah.
And their mind and their heart. The bad's going to come, but just try to squeeze it out with all the good.
Yeah, you're so right, because, I noticed it with my own kids. They're a similar age. I've got a boy and a girl, but they're 9 and 7. Like, they don't even care about a screen if the day's full,
Yeah.
You've got a bike ride in, you've got a match in, you go and cook something together, you do this, you do that. It takes care of the problem for you, but it's harder.
It's harder, and it's more fulfilling for you too, though. I just read a book called Dopamine Nation. So good. Highly recommend it. And they just talk about how there's one quote in there, and they said, there's so much is stimulating our dopamine like never before. I mean, for thousands of years, life was generally kind of boring.
Yeah.
You're just wandering looking for food. You're talking around the campfire. Not necessarily negative, but not thrilling, and not a lot of dopamine. And he said we're like cacti who are raised in the desert. And all of a sudden, we're flooded with water. We're living in the rainforest, which is dopamine. Like we're not designed to have this much dopamine. And so keeping my kids in a low dopamine environment, or low digital dopamine, is huge. And so it's being in nature, it's having a bike ride, it's having family time. That's huge, because it really does rewire your brain. And then one of the worst things I see, and we all see it, is kids who've grown up with phones. And I'm not judging anyone, but because it's a good babysitter, but. And their brain is so structured to want that and crave that they can't even go to a museum. They can't even go play at the beach. They just want to go back to the phones. And one of the best things I've done as a parent, because I've made my mistakes, oh my goodness, is I just keep them, like we say, active in healthy things. A lot of time outside all the time, jumping and running and whatever. A lot of time in wilderness if I can, a lot of physical time, a lot of board games. My wife helps them paint a lot, do music a lot, dancing a lot. I mean, that's the best I can do, is keep them away from digital stuff.
Well, and you role model a healthy lifestyle too, right? That makes a big difference for them.
Yeah. Well, I do my best. And like they say, I try to put down my phone whenever my kids are in the room. Yeah. I don't always do it, but I try to put it down, and it helps me be better too.
For sure.
And they always say, your kids do as you do, not as you say.
Yeah, for sure.
And holy cow, is that like a, shocker,
Well, I do think about also how, if we can reframe provider protector for the planet, there's a massive reframe there for fathers on the provider and the protector of your kids from these negative outside influences, right? Whether it's ultra-processed foods, whether it's screen time, whether it's inactivity. Yeah. Like, if we could get more men to adopt that protector archetype as it relates to those things, I think it deals with a massive chunk of these problems.
I totally agree. And again, because it's very effective, that approach, and also it triggers that primal masculinity, and then it makes you. That's inherent in all men, and women too, the mama bear thing, But I mean, and that's what we have to do, is again make it masculine to protect the planet, and it's so easy to say protect your land and protect your family, and every man is like, yes, they want to pull out their sword or whatever.
Yeah, 100%. And I guess part of this problem, though, is that we've convinced ourselves, right? We agree with this stuff. Like, we're like, let's talk to the skeptic for a minute, right? What about the man who is starting to hear climate skepticism? Maybe they're going down a bit of a rabbit hole on YouTube. Maybe they're listening to Rogan or they're seeing it on TikTok. Like, what do you say to that man who is perhaps veering toward that path?
Well, again, so climate change is one of the most scientifically proven natural phenomena in the history of the world. If they are skeptic, I'd like to show, here's another wrinkle that's crazy. So anyway, we talk about the trope of protect your land.
Yeah.
Talk about, science. It's unbelievably scientifically proven. The data is unbelievable there, but that doesn't really get us. We need to get this emotional, protect your land. But you go with, I hate to repeat it, but this is what really works. It's you show coastal real estate statistics.
Yeah.
You show insurance statistics. Insurance around the world show insurance claims from natural disasters have skyrocketed.
Yeah.
And they don't mess around. They know those numbers, right? So that's money. That really proves it. So, and then you come back to, even if it's fake, right? Even if it's blown out of proportion, which it's not, don't you want to protect? Don't you want to not pollute the planet? Don't you want to, help protect and just keep everything, the air and water and soil, clean? And the last point is, every study I've seen that goes against the idea that climate change is actually happening, everyone that I've ever investigated has been funded by some moneyed interest who benefits from not talking about climate change.
Yeah.
And so, you just have to look at what, follow the money. What's the profit incentive? And people say, oh, these environmentalists, there's a huge financial incentive. No, there's not. Yeah. Like what? No. Yeah. I'm going to conquer the world with my organic farm? No. There's not. There's a small incentive, I guess, or they say, oh, we get government subsidies. Deutsche Bank just did a study, $6 trillion in direct and indirect subsidies to fossil fuels every year globally. $6 trillion. We could convert the entire planet to renewable energy in 2 decades with that money. Yeah. So the financial, it's just, so I hit him with all of those.
Yeah. As someone who is, an academic, close to the data, close to the research, do you get a sense as to why there does seem to be a sort of growing climate skepticism movement?
Gosh, a sense as to why. Truly, what's interesting is, because we're in the digital age, it's just so much easier to control the narrative. Yeah. And there's this false dichotomy presented where, and you hear about this a lot, where, they say about 97% of climate scientists agree that it's happening and it's caused by humans, and then 3% don't. But in the debates, it's like, well, there's this side and that side. Well, not really. There's 97 over here and 3 over here, and 2.5 of the 3 over here are funded by fossil fuels. And so there's a couple people that maybe. And here's another thing. So that's a false dichotomy. Here's another thing. When you really get into the physics of it, there's a lot of inconsistencies. There's a lot of subtleties, and there's a lot of positive and negative feedback loops. It's not just this linear progression. So it's very complex. Very complex. On the aggregate, it's massively happening very quickly. But the papers and the people and the details that people are pulling out are those inconsistencies in a small temporal context. And they're saying, look, see, there was a warming period in the medieval era. Or there's this, negative feedback loop where, sometimes they point a tiny little thing and they say, see, it's not happening. Yeah. But on the aggregate, it's overwhelmingly happening. So that's where they can draw some doubt. Yeah. And if you frame it right and you say it enough and you control the narrative, the digital narrative, then, or you buy Twitter, for instance. Yeah. And not just against Elon, it's anyone who owns a media empire.
Yeah.
Definitely the left does it, the right does it. I mean, we control narratives. We're controlling this narrative right here,
Yeah,
but
for sure.
we don't have enough money to control other ones, unfortunately.
Yeah,
We don't have
absolutely.
billions yet.
Yeah, absolutely. No, it's interesting, and I feel like you're a strong communicator. You've got this online following. You've written books. Like, it's almost like the scientific community is having to play catch up with the social media community, who can immediately platform views which aren't grounded in science, but they have access to a big audience.
Well, it's funny you say that, because that's one of the main reasons. When I was getting my degree, I always knew I'd be a professor, and I was watching these professors, and I had this, and I just decided I'm going to be different. And one day I made a lot of enemies on this day. I was at the University of Wisconsin, and I wrote my master's thesis. The title of my master's thesis was Las Vegas, Baby. And I was talking about Vegas being this harbinger of urban morphology and all these things. They said, oh, this isn't even real. But this was a very substantive paper. It's just a funny title. But I said, you guys, in my little seminar, I said, no one's going to read your dissertations. I said, I'm going to write this up into a book or an article, and 1 million people are going to read it. And they just were like, you prick. But my point was not that I'm some brilliant writer. It was that you have to make these ideas accessible.
Yeah.
There's so much brilliance in these so many smart people, and they're writing these articles that are so convoluted and so inaccessible. It's crazy. And I realized I was doing that. Like, I was getting into that realm, and I read stuff that I wrote back then. I'm like, who wrote this?
Yeah.
It's kind of impressive in a way. I was like, wow, I could write this. And also, it's not, because anyone can learn the jargon, and then you're just going around in circles and nobody reads it. So what's this doing? It's just having gold in a vault, and you don't spend it. It's this intellectual prowess that's just trapped in these terrible, convoluted articles. And so, and I wrote a couple of those, and then I just got out of that world and published a couple, and I got out of that. I was like, no one's going to read this.
Yeah.
And so that's why, my first book, which was very substantive, but again, the title was 5 Ways to Save the Planet in Your Spare Time.
Yeah.
It's like, oh, that's interesting. You crack it open. You're not going to crack it open if you say the vicissitudes of payment for ecosystem services and feminist political ecology.
Yeah.
That's what I really researched, but no one's going to read that.
Yeah.
So, I thought, let's put this to use.
Yeah. Fantastic. And look, we've hit on some big societal issues today, and at some point we need to land the plane, because we could keep going. But what's one reframe you would offer to men who are starting to question their role in some of the topics that we've touched on?
Well, we've hit on the big ones, but there's also this word that's just responsibility. Mature adults accept responsibility. We have responsibility to care for our bodies, for the planet, for our children, and we abdicate that sometimes. And that's immature. It's immature to abdicate. I don't know if abdicate's the right word, but to shuck our responsibility. And, and in the Western and the Eastern religion, the Western religions it's all about sovereignty and dominion over nature. Okay, well, that doesn't mean we should crush nature. It means we have the responsibility to do what we want with it and to steward it. So it really comes down to responsibility, I would say, and to maturity. And just a wrinkle on that is that includes animals. And I know this is a bleeding heart angle, but it's beneath us as humans to systematically harm animals as much as we do in the concentrated animal feeding operation realm. I mean, that's 70 billion animals who are systematically tortured, and that's just beneath us. I don't know if we should eat animals or not. I'm not here to judge that. I know we shouldn't raise them like that.
Yeah.
It's not good for their health, our health, planet's health. It's not good. We need a different model to raise animals, certainly on a smaller scale. I know that's a different topic, but it's part of the responsibility, because we're caring for living sentient beings. And so we got to care for ourselves and our kids. We got to care for animals. We got to care for the planet. And it comes down to responsibility, and don't shuck that responsibility.
Yeah. That's powerful. So is there anything you'd add to that around what healthy masculinity means?
It's fun. I mean, I think we've hit it pretty good. I mean, all I would say is I was raised by a a very strong man, and I'd say healthy. He maybe could have been a bit better at expressing his emotions, and he was raised on a farm, and he cared for the land and the animals with such passion. And again, it's healthy to have that responsibility, to have that care, to protect your land, to protect, and it's protection, it's responsibility. And a 30-second story to finish that idea. We were in Cairo, me, my dad, my mom, my sister. I was 25-ish. And there was a man, we were near the pyramids. There was a man whipping this horse. It's a really hot day, and the horse was carrying tourists. And the horse was sweating profusely and had clearly been overworked. And he was whipping this horse like you can't believe. And it just had sat down. Yeah. And he was still whipping it. I was like, what are you doing, man? He's not going to get up. And if you haven't been to Cairo, it's pretty chaotic. Yeah. You don't feel safe necessarily as a Westerner. Yeah. My dad's deep instincts to protect animals came out. He ran up to that man. He grabbed the whip out of his hand and he said, "How would you like it if I whipped you?" And he raised up the whip. And the man just kind of cowered. And then he gave it back to him. And some people would say, oh, that's the white Western imperial way of dominant, whatever. I don't agree. He was protecting that animal. And I thought that's a beautiful thing. And my dad has some ways that he's a very traditional man, but I guess the point is we all have it in us to be responsible, to protect, and to be more than just a traditional man, but to evolve. Yeah.
Well, look, I think that's a pretty powerful sentiment to end the conversation, Greg. Where can people follow your work and connect further with what you're doing?
theplanetdoctor.com, all spelled out, or theplanetdoctor on Instagram.
Nice. Anything you haven't said as a final thought or invitation to the men who are listening to us today?
Oh, gosh. All I would say is, I'm with you, brother. Let's do this. Let's move forward. Let's love each other. Let's love the planet. And let's get it done.
Let's get it done. Sounds good. Thanks, Greg.
Brilliant. Thank you, Tim.
Cheers. So, if you got something from today's conversation, do me a favor, like, subscribe, or share this episode with someone who might need to hear it. It really helps the show grow and reach more men who are ready for change. And if you're curious about coaching or want to dig deeper into writing and reflections around purpose, well-being, and modern masculinity, head over to thefeelgoodfolk.com. Everything's there, and you'll find the link in the show notes, along with Greg's work. This podcast is about rallying good men who want to grow, lead, and live with intention, so that together we can reclaim masculinity as a force for good. Thanks for listening. Work hard, be kind, and I'll catch you at the next one.